Right, okay, I think, well, let's, if you don't mind, if we can start with your time in the Conservative Party. Obviously, you were in the Conservative Party, you were expelled from the Conservative Party for speaking out about COVID-19, and now we're in a situation where everybody's starting to come around to your way of thinking about COVID-19. Do you feel vindicated slightly by the fact that it's all coming to light now?
Well, I think the evidence has been out there for a very long time. It is getting slightly more coverage in the mainstream media. It's a sort of controlled hangout, but we haven't gone as far as we should have done yet. And quite honestly, until we get to the point where the public know all the truth and it's acknowledged, and we hold those responsible for what I believe is the biggest crime against humanity in history to account, there is no guarantee that this situation won't repeat itself, and that would be unbearable.
So with that in mind, Reform's move yesterday to bring on Nadine Zahawi onto Reform is a pretty poor decision, you would say.
Well, obviously I've known Nadine Zahawi since 2010, probably met him a bit before that as a candidate. Yeah, he was the vaccine minister who rolled out the COVID shots in the UK, and Nigel Farage has flip-flopped on the vaccines repeatedly. So when I realised what was going on in 2022, and the government wanted to vaccinate down to babies of 6 months, I went round all of my colleagues in the House of Commons, Brexiteers mostly, people I'd campaigned with, people I trusted, and shockingly, many of them in November 2022 told me that they thought there was something wrong with the vaccines. Many of them had got vaccine harms themselves, or relatives who had vaccine harms, or constituents they knew. But to a man and a woman, they all refused to speak out about it. I mean, one senior colleague admitted to me that he'd had 2 Pfizer shots, gone down the gym, had terrible chest pains, forced him to go to hospital. He had an ECG and they told him he'd already had 2 heart attacks. And if he wasn't as fit as he was, he would be dead. And I was convinced that colleague would have stood with me, but he didn't. Another colleague who's actually come out now, Andrea Jenkins, she came to me in July 2023 in the House of Commons and said, "You're absolutely right." At the time when she was a minister in the government, she came to me privately and said, you're absolutely right about the vaccines. My sister has taken a Moderna booster, and now she's paralysed from the neck down. And I said, "I'm really sorry, Andrea, that's very bad news, but now you know you've really got to speak out." And she said, "Well, it's not as simple as that. My sister's a nurse and she was coerced into taking the vaccine, and now she's at the mercy of the NHS because she's paralysed." She said, "And you know what the NHS are like with whistleblowers, Andrew. I don't trust them, so I can't speak out." And she never did. But I implored her. I said, "Well, look, you don't need to mention your sister. You've got 100,000 constituents like I have. You got lots of emails about vaccine harms. Don't mention your sister." And she never spoke out. I had MPs' wives come to me and say, "You're right about the vaccines. My I told him not to take them, and now he's got a heart condition." And then they came to me and said they'd had a deputation of 1,200 of their constituents with vaccine harms, and they were definitely going to speak out, but no one ever did. And the ultimate thing was, before I was expelled from the Conservatives, and I was warned plenty of times. That this was a no-go area. And bear in mind, in the House of Commons, we're supposed to speak on behalf of our constituents without fear or favour. Well, they tried to bribe me in January 2022. I was offered anything I wanted in the world to sell my people out. Jeez. And I was shocked. And I said, what do you mean? They said, "Well, you just tell us what you want and we give it to you." I said, "Anything I want?" They said, "Well, pretty much, yes." I said, "Is that the game we're playing then?" And they said, "That's the game we're always playing, Andrew." So I said, "Well, in that case, I know what I want. If that's the game we're playing, I want the Prime Minister's resignation letter. Can I have that?" And they said that was the one thing I couldn't have. So I said, well, that's a shame because I don't want anything else, if that's the game we're playing.
So that's obviously one mechanism they used.
And at the end, the final warning for me before I was expelled was a meeting with a grandee of the party who I had great respect for. I have no respect for him whatsoever now. And I gave him an hour and a half on the vaccine harms. He doesn't know that I knew his own sister had had 2 Pfizer shots and had to go to hospital with chest pains overnight. He knew. I knew his constituents had been to see him. And I also talked about NG163 and the euthanisation of vulnerable elderly who were in hospital when COVID started. The people who were moved supposedly to care homes and nursing homes to clear them out of hospital to make way for the first wave of COVID patients who never came. Well, they weren't. Mostly those vulnerable elderly were in hospital for a reason. They were having medication. Well, they were mostly sent away without their medication, but they were sent with midazolam and morphine. NICE Guideline 163, which was brought in by Matt Hancock on the 3rd of April 2020. Midazolam and morphine are a respiratory suppressant. They were to be given to people they suspected of having COVID-19. As I raised many times in the chamber, why would anybody give a respiratory suppressant to someone you suspected of having a respiratory illness? There was never any answer from the ministers on this. I believe that the vulnerable elderly, tens and tens of thousands of them, were euthanised, all put down as COVID because they would have died breathlessly, and that was to create the fear to force people to consider having the experimental COVID-19 vaccines. So at the end of that meeting, where I'd explained all my concerns about the vaccines and NG163, the murder of vulnerable elderly, to create hysteria, I was told by the party line was, Andrew, there is currently no political appetite for your views on the vaccines. There may be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then. But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world with all the personal risk for you which that will entail should you continue to do so. And I came into politics, Northwest Leicestershire. I won a seat that I was not supposed to win. I used my own money to fund the campaign, not the party wouldn't fund me, because I'm not in the club. It was 83rd target seat. I won it handsomely and increased my majority every single election. And 12 years we turned what was the poorest part of Leicestershire into the richest part of Leicestershire. Yeah, and that annoyed the Conservative Party immensely. They've been coming after me for a very long time. So it's not just the vaccines. I exposed the post office scandal, which was the Horizon post office scandal, which was very unfortunate for them because, unfortunately for the government, Michael and Susan Rudkin were my constituents. He was the chair of the Sub Postmasters Federation, who accidentally, inadvertently, was shown around Fujitsu's headquarters in 2008 and was shown them altering accounts in Sub Postmasters Horizon systems without their knowledge. And by the time he got home, when he told me this story when I was first elected, it was unbelievable. It was a conspiracy theory of how him and his wife were stitched up. And it all turned out to be true. So Michael had gone down to Bracknell, to Fujitsu's headquarters, as part of his duties of representing all the sub-postmasters in the UK. His wife was running the post office in Ibstock in northwest Leicestershire, a few miles from where we're sitting now. And he was shown round, and he thinks they mistook him for someone else. He said because when the visit was over near enough, they took him down into what they called the boiler room, showed him dozens and dozens of IT engineers tapping away on computers. And he recognised that they were working on Horizon because obviously he'd run that system himself. And he took talking to them and he said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Oh, we're sorting all the glitches out." The system that the post office always maintained, there was no glitches. And he said, "Well, yeah, but what's this then?" He said, "Oh, it's a currency transaction that's gone wrong." and if I don't put this right, there'll be a shortfall in the post office. And he said, well, you can't do that without the sub-postmaster knowing, can you? Oh, yeah, we do it all the time. And there were dozens of them in there doing it, in this Rolls-Royce system. And he said, and then he thinks they sussed out who he was. So they threw him out the building. And so they pushed him out. Yeah. So then he got in his car and drove back up from Bracknell up to here. And he was thinking about everything he'd seen. And obviously, he knew that every time a sub-postmaster was taken to court, the post office, the Crown, prosecuting, always said that no one can alter the accounts without the sub-postmaster knowing. So any shortfalls got to be down to them. He arrived home late, and he went to bed. Him and his wife went to bed, and before they even got out of bed in the morning, the door was being battered down by the post office inspectors, and they were shouting that you're £44,000 short overnight and you're going to be prosecuted, and they were. And if you believe, by coincidence, that they had a problem on their computer the same day that Michael Rudkin had inadvertently uncovered what was going on in 2008, and they were put through the criminal justice system and convicted. That wasn't a computer error.
Yeah.
Right? No one at Fujitsu has ever been held to account for that. And I was the MP who got Boris Johnson to authorise the public inquiry by Judge Wynne Williams. And I filled all the forms in when the inquiry was formed to give my evidence, which some of it you've just heard now, which I think is damning. I wrote to that public inquiry every 6 months for 3.5 years, asking, when are you calling me as a witness? Oh, before Christmas, but they never said which Christmas. And at the end, they said, we don't require your evidence, Mr. Bridgen. And that's why I haven't, and the public inquiry system, everyone calls for public inquiries, want a public inquiry into this, we want a public inquiry into that. Public inquiries were brought in by Tony Blair in 2003. That's because he knew he was in trouble over the Iraq war, and he wanted a system which would mean a long delay and a very expensive process where lawyers enrich themselves, where no firm conclusions and no one's ever held to account. And that is the public inquiry system. We don't need public inquiries in this country. We don't need a public inquiry into COVID-19 or the vaccines or NG163. What we need is private criminal prosecutions of individuals where the allegations are put and the evidence is put against them for their criminal acts, and they say, what's your defence? We'll see you in court. That's what we need. Don't need any more public inquiries, because all that happens is, like every single one of them, it's years and years and years and years, and it comes out that, and they're actually precluded from giving out criminal responsibility. They can't come to that conclusion. It's not within their remit. So people think that it's bringing justice, and it never brings justice. All it does is allows the perpetrators to get away with their crimes repeatedly. That's what it's there for. So the system's broken. The whole system's broken. It was broken over that. I also exposed the modern slavery in Leicester in the fast fashion industry, where you've got thousands and thousands of people working in sweatshop conditions in the city of Leicester, some 15 miles away from my constituency, being paid £2.50, £3 an hour. You know, third world. And some of those people were being forced. They found one house in Leicester, a two-up, two-down terraced house with 16 mattresses on the floor. And that's only half the story, because they were hot bunking. There were 32 people living in there using one kitchen and one bathroom. They were hot bunking at the same sweatshop. Because, I mean, when you're on £2.50 an hour, your housing options are not immense, are they? Mm-hmm. No. And there were thousands of those. I mean, these things have been covered up, they're covered up, they're covered up, they're covered up. I did an investigation into thalidomide, looking for the similarities between what had gone on with Big Pharma, and I did that investigation in the summer of 2023 when I was asking for, from January 2023, I was asking for a debate in the House of Commons on excess deaths. After a pandemic, if we've had a pandemic, and sadly the weak and the vulnerable have passed before their time, so we've had excess deaths, we've had a lot of deaths. If those vulnerable elderly people have passed 6 or 12 or 18 months earlier than they might have done because of the pandemic. Unlike what this says in the James Bond film, you can't die twice. So because they've died now in a pandemic, you must expect to have a period of time after a pandemic when you have less than expected deaths. And we didn't have that. After the pandemic, all we had was excess deaths week after week after week. So that didn't make sense. So I wanted a debate on this. And in Parliament, you're allowed to put in for a debate once a week, or one debate a week. You can put in for one topic on, an adjournment debate, a Westminster Hall debate, a main chamber debate. So you can probably put in 3 times in a week for a debate. I put in every time 3 times excess deaths every week. And every week it came back from the Speaker's office that I was unsuccessful in ballot. You can only put in on a sitting week, so the recess weeks you can't put in. And you can see why I don't play the lottery, because it came back 26 times unsuccessful in ballot. So that would have been 78 attempts to get a debate on excess deaths, and that was 9 months. And in the end, in the summer of 2023, I made a little mini documentary called Thalidomide, The Real Story. And I sent it to the Speaker. And I don't know what you know about thalidomide. I didn't know the full facts about it. Thalidomide was produced by a German company called Chemie Grünenthal. Grünenthal was formed after the war, and they recruited former Nazi scientists as their research department. Their head of research was a gentleman by the name of Heinrich Mulker, and he'd been indicted for war crimes against the Poles in Poland during the war, but he was never prosecuted. And he developed thalidomide. Grünenthal gave it was an anti-nausea drug, and its selling point was that you couldn't overdose on it, so you could take as much as you wanted. And it was given out for free to Grünenthal's staff before it went to market. And they actually had the wife of an employee gave birth to a baby with no ears, but they didn't say anything. And they pushed it out to market. And what they didn't know, or maybe they did know, but what the public didn't know was that thalidomide crossed the blood placenta barrier, and it entered the fetus, and women were being prescribed it for morning sickness. And it prevented angiogenesis, which is the formation of blood vessels. And obviously, the effect on the fetus depended on the amount of the drug that the mother took and the stage at gestation which she took it. But that's about half of the babies died, and half were born with terrible life-changing injuries, mainly of short limbs, because the arms and the legs couldn't grow because angiogenesis was being prevented by the drug. Thalidomide was withdrawn in 1961 in Europe due to the concerns over the side effects, and it would have affected tens and tens of thousands of pregnant women and their babies. It was 1962 before they withdrew it in South America. And the management of Grünenthal had got injunctions on the press in the UK to stop them printing stories linking thalidomide to birth defects. Looking through the file, that went to the Strasbourg Court of Justice, but didn't go until till the 1970s, and it was overturned. And 3 Strasbourg judges said that the word thalidomide was not allowed to be debated in the House of Commons until 1972. So it was 11 years it was covered up. These judges in Strasbourg decided in their judgment that consecutive speakers of the House of Commons had deliberately suppressed debate on thalidomide for 11 years, which meant no compensation for the victims. And eventually Grünenthal got out of it by putting up a £3 million fund for compensation, which was far less than the profit they'd made out of it. And they did that in return for, guess what? Immunity from prosecution.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Very.
Well, it sounds more familiar when you find out that... Do you know what the marketing slogan for thalidomide was? Safe and effective.
Yeah.
And Big Pharma are actually precluded, following thalidomide, from using the words safe and effective to describe any of their medications without caveats, because there are always side effects.
Yeah.
But of course, when we got to the COVID-19 vaccines, so-called vaccines, gene therapies, it was politicians and doctors who declared that they were safe and effective, because they were that marketing arm for Big Pharma, making claims that Big Pharma could never have said legally following the thalidomide scandal. And I pointed this out to the Speaker of the House of Commons and said, Lindsay, I've gone 9 months, I can't get a debate on excess deaths. We wouldn't want history to repeat itself, because this is what the judges said about the Speakers of the House of Commons. And he found me a debate then within 3 weeks. So I think it was the end of October 2023, I got the first debate on excess deaths in the UK, and it had taken me 9 months. It was something that was affecting every constituency in the country, and I got the public to write to every MP and say, we're interested in this, please attend this debate. And no one turned up to my debate, did they? But the public gallery was full, and you heard the cheering from the public gallery through the bulletproof glass that you've never heard in Parliament before. Never the gap between politics and the people, or our elected representatives of the people, being so wide. And that's the power that Big Pharma have, and the most powerful vested interest in the world. And I came into politics a very rich, self-made man. I was worth about 15 million. I was running my own business, making £3 million a year profit. I had no debt. I had 2 million in my private pension fund. And I thought I could put something back into my society and improve North West Leicestershire. And I think we have. But because of what I've done and the campaigns I've fought for justice for the postmasters, the modern slavery in Leicester, the vaccine harm, I came out of politics penniless. Because the government moved against me. Those most powerful vested interests in the world moved against me. Through very corrupt judicial systems, I've lost control of my business. I can't even access my private pension. My house was taken off me by HS2, and £500,000 less than it owed me, and £360,000 less for it than I'd paid for it 5 years before. That was not by accident. I'm the only MP who had to sell his house to HS2. I opposed that for 10 years and said this is going to be a disaster, and it's going to end up costing a fortune. And that's another fraud. HS2 is a massive fraud. It's just a land grab. After 13 years and £50 billion worth of taxpayers' money, do you know how much track they've laid? Not 1 yard. We're supposed to have had trains running by 2020.
Well, yeah, quite.
So, I mean, it's fraud after fraud after fraud. And I'm afraid we need the current system of governance we have in this country and around the world is so deeply flawed. It is not there to protect or represent the interests of the people. It is there to represent the elites that it's set up for. And if you play in that game, you cannot win. We need a new system of governance. We need the truth to come out about what's been going on. And we need a new system of governance, a completely new system that actually serves the people. Because the system we've got, with your digital ID we'll be talking about shortly, is there to enslave them.
What do you see as that alternative being?
We need to, you can't trust politicians, they're too corruptible. So they're human and they're very corruptible, and also most of them are not brave. So what we need is direct democracy. People will say, oh, I'm not interested in politics. Well, when you're not interested in politics, we end up in a situation like this. You defer your decision making to politicians, we end up in this situation. And if you think the system we've currently got that's got us into this situation on all fronts, economically, culturally, scientifically, corrupted, is going to get us out of it, it's not. It's the system that's put us in here. It's not going to get us out of it. So direct democracy. So if it were my choice, I'd get rid of the House of Lords tomorrow. That's a house of cronies. What people who go to the House of Lords generally, they're people who are well regarded by their parties. That's because the political system we have in this country rewards members of Parliament not for doing what's good for the people who they're supposed to represent, but for doing what's good for their party, and the parties are corrupted. So you've ended up with the worst of the worst politicians being in the House of Lords. Why haven't anybody in the House of Lords ever spoken out when they're not even standing for election? They can't be removed, got a perfect platform to protect the public interest. How many of them have spoken out about the vaccines? How many of them spoke out about the post office scandal before? None of them, because they play the party game.
Yeah.
So we get rid of the House of Lords. I would halve the number of MPs tomorrow. We don't need 650. I just double the size of the constituency. I would double the money, but no external interests while you're an MP, and you can only do 3 terms. So no professional, lifelong members of Parliament. You could do 3 terms and then have a time back in the real world, and then you could come back again probably, maybe, but no continuous service from the age of sort of 21 or something. And we would produce legislation in the House of Commons which would have to go to referendum of the people every 3 months, and it would be the people who become the second chamber, with open public debate on all the laws that we want to pass. But to deliver that, you've got to have a free and fair press who will allow the issues to be exposed so the people can have the knowledge they need. And we don't have that in this country at the moment. That's a system that's very akin to what's been on in Switzerland. They haven't been to war for 150 years, and their standard of living, their average income, household income, is twice ours. That would sound, and I think, we would be in the ludicrous position where people in the country, the electorate, have effectively voted for policies to reduce immigration for the last 3 or 4 elections, and it's only ever gone up. It would stop governments from ramming through legislation which is not in their manifesto. And one of those things is digital ID, which wasn't in Labour's manifesto.
No.
But you'll notice it wasn't in the Conservative manifesto either. You know why? Because it's de facto it was coming in anyway. And the Conservatives make me projectile vomit at the moment when they stand in the chamber and say, oh, Starmer's bringing in mandatory digital ID. The Conservative Party bought in, they'd done all the so-called public consultation on it. The reason it wasn't in the Conservative manifesto is because it was in everybody's manifesto. It was not an item of dispute between the Conservatives and Labour. It's always coming in. It's absolutely fundamental for another issue that no one talks about, but everyone supports, all the political parties support, which is Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 can't be brought in without the digital ID. So even when Starmer now says it's not going to be mandatory to work, it's still coming in. I think they've already got it. They've admitted they've got 11 million of them already, and they'll be knowing that through interaction with government agencies, people are either knowingly or inadvertently going to hand over their digital ID. Yeah. And also, he hasn't said that he'll stop collecting them on the children. And if that starts with young children, after so many years, they've got all the adult population anyway. It's horrendous.
It is horrendous. So, I mean, let's talk about what you saw. Did you see much of it starting out during your time in the Conservative Party? Did you see that this was coming forwards?
Yes, and I spoke on a number of issues to Nigel Farage in 2023. He was out of politics, but I mean, he was still in charge of the Reform Party, and he was making a lot of money in the media. When I'd actually run out of politicians in Parliament to speak to, I actually had a meeting with Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks, and I spoke to them about the vaccines and urged him, giving him all the science. And by the way, my degree at Nottingham University in 1986 just happened to be in biological sciences with biochemistry, specialising in virology, genetics and behaviour. Good move, that.
Yes.
And I gave it all to him and Aaron Banks in a pub in London for an hour and a half. And at the end, I urged him, will you help me stop them murdering the children? And he said that he would not be speaking about the vaccines, and if I knew what was good for me, I wouldn't either. I also spoke to Nigel about Starmer's plans to, well, clearly it was for the Conservative plans as well, to move us into a defence and securities union with the European Union, despite the fact that we've left, which would effectively put our Army, Navy, Air Force, military procurement, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, our nuclear deterrent, and our local police force under the control of Ursula von der Leyen, something which Starmer signed us up for in August 24 as soon as he was elected. And I explained all that that was the plan of the Conservatives and the Labour Party, and Nigel said his comments were equally dismissive of, he said, Brexit's done, Andrew, we don't talk about that anymore. Farage is completely compromised. He is a Trojan, him and Reform are a Trojan horse, absolute Trojan horse, to give the people some hope that there is an alternative to the Uni Party when they are actually fully embedded in the Uni Party. And when we saw that theatre only yesterday with Nadeem Zahawi being recruited into, proudly welcomed into Reform, I mean, that's... So Nigel, in January 23, is not talking about the vaccines, but obviously he knows that they're killing people, but he's not talking about them. And that's not leadership, Digby. There's another word for that, and you know what it is, and so will your viewers know exactly what it is. And I think that disqualifies anybody from high office. Yeah. So he knew about it then. A few months ago, him and Tice. Oh, and Tice told everybody in January 2023 that Andrew Bridgen was completely wrong about the vaccines. Then they'd flip-flopped a few months ago to, we need a public inquiry, these vaccines, we've been lied to about the vaccines and they're hurting people. And now we've got Zahawi being welcomed in, saying that Nigel fully supports the rollout of the vaccines. Well, I mean, it would seem to be a bit of confusion around this policy. Zahawi, and I mean, he's already taken in Maria Caulfield as another previous Conservative vaccine minister, who stood at the dispatch box and stonewalled me for a couple of years in Parliament, asking questions about the safety and efficacy of the mRNA treatments. These people need political cover. I mean, they're guilty of crimes against humanity, and then they're not the most guilty, but they're clearly guilty, I believe, and they want cover. So that, of course, they want to be into the party that's probably going to be in power next for that protection. I mean, Boris Johnson will be coming in there soon. Honest Johnson.
So I think one of the things that people struggle with is it's not a stretch to believe that all these things are happening and they exist. But what people struggle with, I think, the most is, why is this happening? And it's like, yeah, but that can't be true, because why would they want to do that? What is the reason? We've had COVID. We've been locked inside our houses. We're now having digital ID forced upon us. They can say that they're not going to force it upon us now, but they are. It's very clear. What is? I mean, I think you and I both know the motives behind this, but for the benefit of everybody else, in your words, what is the end goal and why do they want to achieve it?
Well, it's unpalatable thought, but I mean, I think you have to look at it logically, and I've had plenty of time to look at it logically over probably the last 3 or 4 years. I'm afraid the bad news is that the AI and robotics are so good that the world's super elite, and we're talking about people worth tens, if not hundreds of billions of pounds, you know, the 0.1%, who are actually controlling the world by owning the media, the politicians, the big businesses, they don't need us anymore. They don't need any more humans on the planet than enough for their own personal interest, because the robotics and the AI are so good, and they're better at doing the jobs that need to be done than humans. So they've created this absolute pseudoscience of man-made global warming and demonising carbon dioxide, so that they've got another method to tax us reduce our freedom. In fact, persuade people to join the religious cult of man-made climate change, and then we'll give up our freedoms, willingly, hand in our cars and not have children to save the planet, which is a fantastic contract that they've done, and politicians around the world are playing the game, and as there's so much with it's the developed world committing economic and cultural suicide deliberately through these policies, being brought in lockstep, whether that's uncontrolled migration, net zero. I mean, we are. It was clear to me some years ago, and when you do the analysis before COVID, just before COVID happened, the world's super elites invested $500 billion in China. During the lockdowns, they put another £500 billion worth of investment, and through bringing in the Great Reset and net zero, what we've done is priced ourselves out of making anything in the developed world. So now we're in the ludicrous position where energy costs in the UK are 5 times more expensive than China, 4.5 times more expensive than India. And where's all the work that we used to manufacture in the UK and sell to the world, which we are no longer capable of doing? Where's it all going? It's going to China and to India. And in the ludicrous measure of the economics and statistics of net zero, if we don't manufacture the goods and just bring them in from China, it goes on their carbon footprint, not ours. In the same way that if we shut down the North Sea oil and gas fields and then buy it from the same oil and gas fields via the Norwegians, it goes on their carbon footprint, as if that, even if carbon dioxide were a thing, which it's not, it wouldn't make any difference, because all we're doing is exporting the carbon. So all the green energy projects, the wind turbines, the solar panels, which are actually subsidy farms, and that's why your bills are going higher, because you're subsidising all of this green energy. There's all those so-called green energy projects, they're all manufactured using coal-fired power stations, cheap electricity in China. We've got the Trent Valley here, which is the border mostly between Derbyshire and Leicestershire on that side. We used to have a lot of power stations. We had the last power station, coal-fired power station in the UK, was actually just about 4 miles north of here at Ratcliffe-on-Soar, just over the Trent on the Nottingham side. But I remember the power stations along the Trent Valley being dismantled, and I spoke to some of the engineers only a few weeks ago who did the disassembling. All the gubbings out of those coal-fired power stations were boxed up and sent to China. Within months, they would have been producing cheap coal-fired power station energy in China. So where was the net gain for the planet? Where was the net gain for the planet? All we did was gave China all our work and priced ourselves out. And that's even if carbon dioxide were a thing, which it's not.
It's self-sabotage, isn't it? And I think it's all designed, personally, the way I see it.
And it really annoys me when the government say, consecutive governments, we're going to smash the gangs. Yeah. Now, I put it to you that anyone with a modicum of intelligence must realise something's going on. If, with all the power of the state, of MI5, GCHQ, Special Branch, the military, how many gangs have been smashed or infiltrated? Why has no one ever analysed, one of our scientific labs analysed the dinghies as to where they come from, who's manufacturing them, who's selling these large numbers of dinghies to people, and track it down that way? Why haven't we got some undercover agents to infiltrate the illegal migrants and find out who they're having to pay all this money? I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? No. There's only one gang has been smashed, Digby. But that was a gang that was smuggling disillusioned migrants back to France. They got smashed, and they're all in prison now. Wow. I think that tells you all you need to know about it. It's government organised. Yeah. Isn't that treason?
Yes.
Right. It drops into place. Are you old enough to remember when Tony Blair got into power in 97?
Yes, I am.
And you admit it. Interesting, good. Good man. Right, well, I was interested in politics, but obviously I wasn't involved in to the extent I am now. And obviously Labour had been out of power for 17 years. You'd think they'd have some priorities for legislation as soon as they got in, wouldn't they, to start turning the country round. Do you recall what the first piece of legislation the Labour government, New Labour, put through?
I do not.
It was not in their manifesto. It came out of left field. No one could understand what is a priority. But looking back now, it's very obvious why it was a priority. First thing that Tony Blair's new government did in 1997 was take the death penalty out of the Treason Act. You can see now why that might be a priority, can't you? Because I put it to you that what every government since Tony Blair definitely has done is colluded with powers outside of this country against the interests of the British people. Not only is that treason, because they're paid from the public purse, it is high treason. Every one of them's committed high treason. And there was no more high treason committed than working with Big Pharma to introduce a bioweapon into the arms of innocent people in this country, including children.
A bit like being a US president and giving yourself a pardon.
Yes, well, they're actually immune from prosecution, aren't they?
Yeah. Let's bring it back to digital ID then. I think what we need to do now is, because everything that you're saying is completely valid, but I don't think people in the wider picture have the ability to actually bring it all together and see how it all comes together as one thing. So for me, my thing is that digital ID is the final nail in the coffin. It's the means for control. It's the way that they control carbon. It's the way that they control your bank. It's the way that they control your freedom of speech. And we can move on to that, because I want to touch on what's happening with X.
Absolutely.
As well.
Digital ID is the cornerstone of Agenda 2030. And all the parliaments around the world have signed up to it. And no one ever talks about it. You can go and check it out on the government website. It was there when the Tories were in power. It's still there now. This government fully supports Agenda 2030. Never goes in any manifestos, and it's never debated on the chamber of the House of Commons. It's verboten to talk about it, but it's always there. They cannot deliver any of that without digital ID. I do not, as we said before, I don't believe that Starmer's not going to bring it in. He might say he'll not make it mandatory, but I mean, the jabs weren't mandatory, but you couldn't work without it. You lost your job, didn't you? Or you couldn't leave the house. There are ways. He's going to use other ways to coerce people, make life very difficult. And I think people have got to accept a level of discomfort to not hand over their digital ID. They've been doing it for a long time under the Conservatives. I was forced to move house again to a smaller house, a smaller rented house. I'm now living in a one-bedroom rented cottage, and of course I have to change the address on my driver's license, and I've done that before. And normally you just send your £35 off, and they change the address. Now you had to do digital ID, and that was back in April when no one was talking about digital ID, and I spotted what it was, and I didn't want to do that. And so to go and do it in person at a post office was a 20-mile round trip, and I went and did it. I'm not sure that people have got to be willing to do that, to take that level of discomfort, not to hand over your digital ID, and that's how they captured the 11 million digital IDs that they've already got. At least I think they've got a lot more than that, and what they're expecting is that by 2029 most people will have interacted with government through the one login system, which was brought in by Grant Shapps, the business minister, and that's what they're aiming to use that as a portal to capture people's digital ID. And of course, at the end, it's only a matter of putting all the data together. I mean, I think they probably they've got all this data on us anyway, but it's in silos, attached to your medical records or your education records or your driving records or your police records, you see, and it's all in different pots because the government does have information on us, but it becomes very dangerous when it's all put together. First of all, that it gives huge power of the state over every one of us and every aspect of our life, the central control, but also the security problem is that if someone hacks it, they've got you as well. And And of course, you know, once they've linked it to your bank account, then we can have the basics of the Chinese social credit system, which, let's not beat around the bush. The elites who run the world have decided that that's the model for how they want society to work around the world. They know they can't sell that to any of us in an election. So that's why no one talks about it. But that is the aim they want to get to. And digital ID is an essential building block to allow them to achieve that aim. And they're not going to give it up lightly.
Why do you think they're so attracted by the idea of the Chinese social credit system?
Well, because you absolute control over every aspect of someone's life. And once they can say, well, if you don't do what we want, we can just freeze your bank account and you won't have any access to it. And you've only got to do a little bit of research and see what happens in China, whereby if, you know, for jaywalking, crossing the street without waiting for the green man to flash, and your picture can be flashed up in the cinema as a person who breaks the rules and you're an outcast. There is an app on Chinese mobiles whereby people who've been denounced by the state of breaking rules, you can see where they are around you and avoid them. I mean, full dystopian future. And that's because, you know, Mr. Starmer decides that you're an undesirable, and this is the same Prime Minister that's now arresting and charging 12,000 people a year in the UK for social media posts. Yeah, the number that were charged in Russia last year was 300, and they've got more than twice our population, to put things in perspective. And I'm just glad we live in a free country.
Aren't we both? Speaking of freedom of speech, obviously what's happening recently at the moment is this attack on Grok, or X, due to these images that have apparently been posted online. I mean, I've obviously seen the ones with women being put in bikinis. They keep mentioning children. I've not seen any evidence of it, and they couldn't also share any evidence of it because they would be breaking the rules themselves. Do you see this as more of an attack directly on Elon Musk and his platform for freedom of speech?
Well, I think the government will have noted, even if all the public haven't, that this week it's been reported that more people are now using the X platform for their news than watch the BBC. And that's deeply worrying for the state, because it means people are not exposed to the propaganda that they have been in the past, and they're losing control. And one way of regaining that control is to shut down alternative media. And that's what they do. And it's interesting also that Albanese in Australia has immediately jumped on what Starmer said. And the Australians are looking at getting rid of X as well. You see, I think that the British and the Australians should be looking at getting rid of Starmer and Albanese. Isn't that a better solution for us all?
Should be a bit easier as well.
A better future, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think they will try and get rid of X, but I think it's a very short-sighted decision for them to try and do that, because I think that would be the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people, especially in the UK and Australia. And it would just go to further justify what we're saying, that our freedom of speech is being eroded.
One thing I think we do know from experience in the UK, if you want to make something popular, make it illegal. People tend to, and I think it has such a following on X now that there would be a massive public outcry. It's a good job we haven't got the full digital ID established now, otherwise familiar registering your opposition to a government policy would be open to sanction, wouldn't we? They can't lock us all up.
No, quite.
I mean, they have locked a lot of my friends up. I mean, 5 years ago, I didn't know anyone who was in prison, but I've known a lot of people who've been in prison in the last 5 years. I visited a lot of people. Well, if we stand together and oppose the digital ID, we've got more chance of not being held as a prisoner of the state. Enemy of the state, yeah. I think I probably am at the moment.
I think you probably are. and I know that you've spoken with people recently as well, who some of those people that were arrested, put in jail for their social media posts. And I think everybody's very glad to see that they are back out.
And also I've been onto the continent to visit people who are being held as political prisoners in other European countries. I'm thinking about, Dr. Rainer Fulmick. You know, he was held in solitary confinement in manacles for 6 months in Germany.
Well, they're just about to make the ability for you to say that a politician in Germany is anti-free speech illegal now, aren't they?
Well, I mean, that's that meme that went around, which Starmer didn't say, but he was thinking, undoubtedly, that, of course we have free speech in this country, and anyone who says we don't will be arrested. I mean, that's where the Germans are getting to, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've just come back from 4 days in the Netherlands speaking out there, and speaking before the premiere of something we haven't talked about today, which is people don't want to talk about really, but I'm afraid it's real as real, and that documentary was about child abuse and child trafficking into the UK, and it's something I've spoken about, and you hit a nerve straight away. They don't want to talk about that. They do not want to investigate it.
20,000 children go missing every single day around the world?
At least, I would have thought, yes. I had evidence of tens of thousands being trafficked from Ukraine into the UK for the paedophiles. No one will look at it.
It's horrific.
And it's just like all those issues that no one wants to talk about, either in the mainstream media or in politics, whether it's the WHO, the vaccine harms, the excess deaths, geoengineering, child trafficking. Whenever anyone doesn't want to talk about anything, that's a red flag for me, from experience, because there's a reason why they don't want to talk about it.
I mean, the child trafficking thing is probably the most horrific story out there, and it's the most bitter pill to swallow. And I think if you mention it to people, they go, "It can't possibly happen."
I know.
That can't be the case.
They hide behind the fact that for any decent person, you cannot put yourself in any mindset that could ever contemplate carrying out those acts. Unfortunately, that's part of the protection of the people who do it, and sadly, I've seen the evidence, and it is deeply disturbing, and it's not even police who are involved in investigating child abuse. They only allow them to work on those cases for 2 years because it does affect your mental health, because it is so dark. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening, unfortunately. It's happening, again, around the world. I'm afraid that I think the compromat around child abuse and child trafficking is the glue of loyalty that holds the corruption together in the UK and across the world. There's more money in child trafficking than there is in drugs, because sadly they can only sell the drugs once, but they sell the children many, many times, and that's unfortunately a fact, and we've got to confront it and deal with this. Why do they do it? Honestly, these people, and I've looked them in the eye, in Parliament and elsewhere, they are Luciferians. It is some sort of child sacrifice cult, because whatever you say, the children are the nearest thing, their innocence, young children, their innocence, and they're in God's image, and it's the biggest affront to decency and to God that these people could do, and that's why they do it, because they revel in it. And that's what makes it so hard for people to comprehend. But it's a thing. It is a thing.
I think people quite often are quite willing to believe in God, but they're not so willing to believe that anybody could act in the name of the devil.
The devil's greatest trick was persuading people he doesn't exist. The difference is that the devil has... God is omnipotent, but the devil has to work through his agents. And as I've found out, the devil can always pay better hourly rates, but the long-term benefits with God are better.
Well said.
Could you ask Andrew about the push for... Sorry, I'm not cutting you out here. The whole trans thing?
Yeah, that's another angle we can go down.
That's another thing that's in lockstep. The trans thing. Yeah, well, I tried to bring in a bill, didn't I, to stop all that.
Well, it's mutilation of children, and it's another level of child abuse as well.
Yeah, I tried to bring in the Child Protection and Parental Rights Bill as a 10-minute rule bill, and I forced it to a vote, and it was narrowly defeated by the cross-party push. In fact, the Conservative Party, that was something that my bill would have stopped the indoctrination, which is actually illegal under the Education Act 95, I think it is. It's illegal to indoctrinate children. Because it's not scientific. I mean, what, telling anybody that a man can become a woman and have a baby? I mean, I think probably when they think you can, if you believe that nonsense, I mean, they probably think they've given you enough propaganda. You've swallowed enough. You probably swallow anything at that stage. But I mean, as I think I said in the speech in the House of Commons, that there are very few certainties in life for a young child than there are boys and there are girls. And if you pull that Jenga block away from the tower, the whole lot can fall over. And this is all Kinsey work on who's basically representing the interests of paedophiles, which has now become taken into mainstream through the United Nations Guidance for the Sexuality Education of Children worldwide, which has been out for about 10 or 15 years. And if you look at that guidance, it says that children of 4 should be taught to masturbate. Says that children of 6 should be able to express their needs and wants as regards sexuality. This is nonsense. This is a groomer's charter. And that's what's being pushed in lockstep around the world. And when we talked about it being pushed in our schools, I spoke with some very sensible senators in the Australian Parliament, and they've got the transsexuals going in at reading time to their infant schools, exactly the same as we are. It's a malevolent influence on our children. It's always about the children, Digby, because the children are the future, and if you catch them young enough, they can influence them enormously. They're being influenced on the net zero. They're being influenced to have self-hate because their skin might be white, and we're responsible for all the ills of the world apparently, and they're being told that they can be whatever they want to be. I actually had a lady and her daughter came to see me in Parliament. They're not constituent, they weren't constituents, and the young girl had got a recording which she'd made at school. One of her classmates was identifying as a cat, and she said it was ludicrous. The young classmate said it was ludicrous, and the teacher, the form teacher, took her outside and she recorded secretly the conversation the teacher had with her. And he told her that if she didn't accept that her friend and play along with her friend wanting to be a cat, she was going to get expelled from school. Now, is that education? I mean, this is the lunatics have taken over the asylum. But of course, you can't say anything to somebody who wants to be a cat, because then you'd have to ask questions about somebody who said claiming they were male. Are they different? And I actually also was investigating before the election. There was a trainee police constable at their college who was identified as a fox, and he was being allowed to be treated as if he was a fox. Is that the sort of policeman we're looking for? I mean, we need to get the politics out of science, whether that's about vaccines, medication, the way the human body works, net zero, or education and psychology of children. Get the politics out of science and get some real science, freely funded, not without influence science, back into our politics, and then we could get humanity back onto the right track. But I mean, we're just going to hell in a handcart at the moment, and it's all deliberate, and it can be stopped very quickly.